Step away from the vehicle. Now, hands where I can see them.
This is my car. I'm the registered owner. What's your probable cause?
Probable cause is you match the call. Quit arguing and turn around.
Asking for cause isn't resisting. You're escalating on assumption.
You people.
Ma'am, step away from the vehicle right now. The officer's voice cut through the late afternoon air of the courthouse parking lot, sharp and impatient. Tires hissed on hot asphalt as cars rolled past sunlight bouncing off windshields, the smell of exhaust and warm concrete hanging heavy. The woman stood still beside a black luxury sedan, one hand resting on the open trunk, the other holding a key fob that blinked softly in her palm. "This is my car," she said calmly. "I'm loading my belongings." The officer moved closer, his hand hovering near his belt. "I've had a report of a stolen vehicle. You match the description. Step away and show me your identification." Around them, the ordinary rhythm of the city slowed. A man pushing a shopping cart paused. A woman waiting for her ride glanced over, then looked again. The woman by the car did not raise her voice. She pressed the lock button. The car chirped, lights flashing once. Then she pressed unlock. The same response. She met the officer's eyes without flinching. "Officer, I am the registered owner. There is no theft here." He shook his head, jaw tightening. "That doesn't prove anything. People steal cars with keys all the time. Turn around and place your hands where I can see them." A breeze carried the distant sound of a siren somewhere downtown. The woman inhaled slowly. She set the grocery bag back into the trunk with deliberate care, as if every movement mattered. "I am asking you to articulate your probable cause," she said. "Standing next to my own vehicle is not a crime." That sentence changed everything. The officer's posture stiffened. His voice dropped colder now. "You're being uncooperative. If you don't comply, I will detain you." Phones came out. One, then another. A young man leaned against a light pole recording. A couple whispered, their faces tense. The woman's expression remained composed, but her eyes sharpened. She glanced briefly at the gathering crowd, then back at the officer. "I am complying under protest," she said. "But you are making a serious mistake." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath. "You people always say that." The words hung there, ugly and unmistakable. The sun dipped behind a cloud, dulling the shine on the black paint of the car. For a moment no one spoke. The city seemed to hold its breath. "Sir," one of the bystanders said quietly, "she showed you the keys." The officer ignored him. He pulled out his handcuffs. "Turn around." The metal glinted in the light. The woman looked at them, then slowly turned, placing her hands behind her back. Somewhere in the crowd, someone muttered, "This is wrong." Another voice said, "Just wait until they find out who she is." The cuffs clicked shut. The sound was sharp, final. And in that instant, what should have been a routine misunderstanding became something far bigger, something that would ripple far beyond this parking lot. 5 hours earlier, long before the parking lot filled with tension and raised phones, the woman had started her day the way she always did. Quiet, methodical. At 5:12 a.m., the lights came on in a modest brick townhouse on the outskirts of the city. No sirens, no escort. Just a kettle heating on the stove and the low hum of morning news playing in the background. She had been awake before dawn for more than 30 years. First as a law clerk studying case briefs by lamplight. Later as a federal prosecutor preparing arguments that could put powerful men behind bars. And now as a senior federal judge reviewing motions that shaped how justice would be applied across multiple states. Discipline was not a habit for her. It was a survival skill. Her name carried weight in courtrooms, but outside them she moved through the world like any other woman in her early 60s. No robe, no gavel, just tailored slacks, a plain blouse, and a leather tote filled with files. She had argued landmark cases on civil rights, ruled against unlawful police searches, and written opinions that limited qualified immunity when officers crossed the line. Those rulings had made her respected in legal circles and quietly resented in others. She remembered the first time she'd stood in federal court as a young attorney, one of the only black women in the room. Judges had mistaken her for a clerk. Bailiffs had asked her who she was there to see. She learned early that credentials alone did not shield you from assumptions. Excellence had to be relentless. Calm had to be practiced. And even then, bias never fully disappeared. Her rise had cost her nights, relationships, and years of her life that never came back. She buried her husband while still on the bench, missed birthdays, postponed grief until after rulings were written and filed. She believed in the law not as an abstract ideal, but as a structure that had to be defended every day, decision by decision, even when it failed people who looked like her. The officer's story began very differently. He was 38, 12 years on the force, solid evaluations on paper, no medals, no major scandals. The kind of officer supervisors described as proactive, assertive, confident, the kind that made stops others hesitated to make. But his file told a quieter story. 3 citizen complaints over 5 years, none sustained, failure to de-escalate, discourteous conduct. 1 allegation of racial bias that internal affairs closed for lack of evidence, body camera footage reviewed, cleared, pattern noted, file closed. He had learned early that backing down looked like weakness. Training drilled control into him, command presence, authority. When people questioned him, it felt personal, like an erosion of order. And when his instincts told him something was off, he trusted them even when they weren't supported by facts. The radio call that afternoon had been vague. Suspicious activity, possible vehicle theft, black female near a high-end sedan. That was all. No plate number. No witness to a crime. Just a feeling passed along the kind that too often became enough. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, his mind had already filled in the blanks. He saw a woman who did not fit his mental picture of ownership. Expensive car. Courthouse lot. Confident tone. Questions instead of compliance. Each detail reinforced the story he had decided was true. Neither of them knew who the other really was when they met beside that car. But both brought years of history with them. One carried the weight of a system she had spent her life trying to make fair. The other carried the unchecked certainty of authority that had rarely been challenged in a way that stuck. And when those 2 histories collided, the outcome was never going to be simple. The parking lot no longer felt ordinary. Cars slowed as they passed. A delivery truck idled too long at the curb. The air seemed thicker, heavier, as if something was about to break. The woman stood with her hands cuffed behind her back, shoulders straight, chin level. The officer remained close-angled toward her, blocking any sense of space. "Officer," she said evenly, "you have my keys. You have my registration in the trunk. You can verify ownership in under a minute." He did not look at the trunk. He did not reach for the paperwork. Instead, he glanced toward the growing cluster of onlookers and raised his voice slightly, just enough for them to hear. "Ma'am, you're being detained while we investigate a possible vehicle theft." Investigate what exactly, she asked. What crime have you observed? That question again. Calm, precise, public. It landed like a challenge. A woman near the sidewalk lifted her phone higher. "I'm recording," she said, more to the officer than to anyone else. A man beside her nodded. "You should be. This don't look right." The officer's jaw tightened. He stepped half a pace closer to the woman, lowering his voice. "You keep talking like that, this is going to get worse." She met his eyes. "I am not required to be silent to make you comfortable." That was the moment control began to slip. He had expected fear, apologies, maybe anger. But not this measured resistance. Not legal language spoken without hesitation. Each sentence she uttered seemed to chip away at the authority he believed he was projecting. He turned to the crowd. "Please step back. This is an active investigation." No one moved. Instead, more phones appeared. A college student leaned against a car, narrating softly to his live stream. Middle-aged black woman arrested for her own car. Courthouse parking lot. No explanation yet. "Sir," another bystander said, "why is she in cuffs?" The officer ignored him. He keyed his radio, requested backup, then looked back at the woman. "What's your name?" She gave it. Clearly, without stumbling. He typed it into his mobile terminal, fingers moving faster now. The screen reflected in his sunglasses. The seconds stretched. A passing bus hissed as it stopped nearby. Somewhere a horn blared, impatient. "You don't look like you work here," he said suddenly. That sentence landed hard. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The woman did not react outwardly, but her breath slowed, controlled. "What does that mean, officer?" "It means this is a secure area. We've had incidents." He gestured vaguely. "You don't fit the profile of someone who owns a vehicle like this." A man in the crowd let out a sharp laugh. "That's what this is about." The officer shot him a warning look. "Sir, you can leave or you can be removed." The man didn't leave, None of them did. The woman spoke again, her voice carrying now. Officer, you are escalating a stop without reasonable suspicion. You have restrained me without probable cause. I am requesting a supervisor. That word changed the temperature. Supervisor. The officer hesitated. Just for a beat. Long enough for the crowd to notice. His radio crackled with static as he pretended not to hear her request. He turned his back slightly, repositioning as if movement alone could reassert control. You're not in charge here, he said. I am. She nodded once. Then please explain your authority to detain me further. Another phone joined the air. A woman whispered to her friend, I think she's a lawyer. Or a judge or something. Someone else said, doesn't matter, she ain't wrong. The officer felt it now. The shift. The subtle but undeniable sense that the audience was no longer on his side. He had made a decision in seconds, and now that decision was being examined from every angle, recorded in high definition, preserved. Backup arrived. Another cruiser rolled in, lights flashing briefly before shutting off. A second officer stepped out, younger eyes scanning the scene. He took in the phones, the crowd, the woman in cuffs standing perfectly still. What do we have? The second officer asked quietly. Possible stolen vehicle, the first officer said. Uncooperative subject. The second officer looked at the woman, then at the car, then back at his partner. She got keys. Yes. Registration in the trunk. Then why is she cuffed? The question hung there. The first officer's face flushed. She refused to comply. The woman spoke softly. I asked for probable cause, or the crowd reacted. That's not resisting, someone said. This is getting bad, another voice murmured. The first officer felt it slipping faster now. His instinct told him to push forward, not retreat. Retreat would mean admitting error. Retreat would mean everyone here was right. He tightened his grip on the situation instead. We're transporting her to the station until this is sorted out. Gasps. Outrage. A woman shouted for what? The officer didn't answer. He guided the woman toward the patrol car. She walked without resistance, each step steady, deliberate. As she passed the crowd, she spoke just loud enough to be heard. Please keep recording. This matters. And with that, the doors closed. The engine started. The crowd stood frozen, phones still raised as the cruiser pulled away, carrying a woman they were now certain had done nothing wrong. The back seat of the patrol car was molded plastic, hard and slick, still warm from the afternoon sun. The door shut with a hollow thud, sealing the sound of the parking lot outside. The woman adjusted her wrists slightly, feeling the bite of metal where the cuffs pressed into skin. Each movement reminded her they were tight. Deliberately so. The car pulled away. Sirens stayed off, but the message was the same. She stared straight ahead through the metal grate, watching the courthouse fade behind them. The building where she had spent decades listening, weighing, deciding the fate of others. Now she was leaving it as a detainee. The officer drove in silence. His knuckles were pale against the steering wheel. The radio crackled once, then went quiet. Traffic lights turned red, then green. The city moved on, indifferent. She counted intersections without trying. 1, 2, 3. She knew this route too well. Her mind shifted gears. Not panic, planning. She replayed every word, every command, every refusal to articulate cause. She noted the time of the stop, the number of officers, the presence of witnesses, the phones, especially the phones. She knew how cases like this were built. She had written opinions on them. The officer glanced in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked away first. You didn't have to make this so difficult, he said finally. She didn't answer. At the station, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The door opened. She stepped out carefully, the cuffs guiding her movements now. A desk sergeant looked up as they walked past. His eyes flicked from the cuffs to her face, then back again. Something in his expression shifted, but he said nothing. Processing was slow. Intentionally slow. Personal items removed. Phone placed in a clear plastic bag. Keys logged. Her tote bag set aside. When the clerk reached for her wallet, she spoke for the first time since the drive. There is a federal identification card inside, she said. The clerk paused, then opened it. The reaction was subtle, but unmistakable. A blink, a second look. The clerk's posture straightened. He turned the card over, checking the seal, the photograph, the title printed beneath her name. His eyes lifted to her face again. He said nothing. He stood up and walked away with the wallet. Minutes passed. The officer who arrested her stood near the wall, arms crossed, now no longer speaking. Other officers moved around the room, glancing over more often than before, voices lowered. A door opened, then closed. The woman remained still, calm, waiting. The officer shifted his weight. His earlier certainty was gone, replaced by something tighter, more fragile. He glanced at the hallway where the clerk had disappeared, then at her. "What exactly do you do for work?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She looked at him. "I'll answer that when your supervisor arrives." The cuffs stayed on. The room seemed to shrink. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. Someone answered it quickly. Footsteps approached faster now. The officer swallowed. For the first time since the parking lot, doubt crept in, thin but sharp. He had committed. He had gone too far to turn back easily. And whatever was happening behind that closed door, he could feel it moving without him beyond his control. She felt it too. The shift. The moment when injustice began to reveal its own witnesses. The door at the far end of the processing area opened without warning. A man stepped through, mid-50s gray, at the temples, posture rigid in a way that signaled authority without effort. Conversations died instantly. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder in the sudden quiet. He held the wallet in his hand. "Who brought her in?" he asked. The arresting officer straightened. "I did, sir. Suspicious vehicle theft investigation." The supervisor didn't look at him. He walked directly toward the woman, stopping a few feet away. He studied her face carefully, then the cuffs, then the card again. "Judge," he said quietly. The word landed like a dropped weight. The room shifted. Officers exchanged glances. Someone near the desk stopped typing. The arresting officer frowned. "Judge what?" The supervisor exhaled through his nose. "United States District Court, senior status." He turned the identification outward so there was no mistake. Seal? Photograph? Title? Everything unmistakable. The arresting officer's face drained of color. "No," he said. "That can't be right. She never said that." The woman met his eyes. "I asked you to call a supervisor." Her voice was steady, flat, final. The supervisor looked back at the officer now. "Did you verify ownership of the vehicle I was in the process of investigating? Did you run the plates? No. Did you articulate probable cause before placing her in restraints?" The officer hesitated. She was uncooperative. The supervisor's jaw tightened. "Uncooperative is not a crime." He turned back to the woman. "Judge, I need to apologize to you on behalf of this department." She nodded once. "Keep going." The cuffs came off. The metal clicked open suddenly, too loud in the silent room. Red marks circled her wrists. No one missed them. The arresting officer took a step back as if space itself might protect him. His earlier certainty had collapsed into something brittle. His hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know," he said. "If I had known who you were," she cut him off. "That's the problem." Her eyes never left his face. "The law is not conditional on my title." The supervisor cleared his throat. "We're going to document everything. Body camera, dispatch audio, witness video, all of it." He paused. "Internal Affairs will be notified immediately." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, I was just doing my job." The supervisor's voice dropped. "No, you exceeded it." In that moment, the full weight of what had happened settled into the room. This wasn't a misunderstanding corrected quietly. This wasn't a warning or a note in a file. This was an arrest of a federal judge without cause, documented by civilians unfolding in real time beyond the walls of the station. The supervisor turned back to her. "Transportation will be arranged. You are free to leave." She picked up her phone from the desk, powering it on. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages, missed calls, voicemails. She looked at the supervisor. "I want copies of everything. Tonight. You'll have them." As she walked toward the exit, officers stepped aside without thinking. The arresting officer remained frozen in place, staring at the floor. He understood now. Not just who she was, but what this meant. Outside, the evening air felt different. Cooler, sharper. She paused for a moment, breathing it in. Then she began making calls. Behind her, inside the station, the first domino had already fallen. By the next morning, the story had escaped the parking lot, the station, the city. It moved faster than any press release ever could. A shaky phone video posted the night before crossed 100,000 views before sunrise. By noon, it was well past 1 million. By evening, it was everywhere. Officer detains black woman for car theft. Turns out she's a federal judge. The footage was unambiguous. Her calm voice, his refusal to explain, the cuffs, the crowd, the drive away. Each clip fed the next. Comment sections filled with anger, disbelief, and recognition. People didn't argue about what happened. They argued about how often it happened. Inside a downtown law firm, a complaint was already being drafted. Not a letter. A federal civil rights lawsuit. Detailed. Surgical. It named the officer individually and the department itself. Unlawful detention. False arrest. Violation of the Fourth Amendment. Equal protection violations. Failure to train. Failure to supervise. Every allegation was tied to a timestamp. The city attorney watched the videos in silence. So did the police chief. So did internal affairs. They saw the same thing the public saw. A stop with no probable cause, an arrest justified only after the fact. Authority doubling down instead of stepping back. An internal investigation began immediately, but it couldn't outrun the internet. Reporters pulled the officer's history. Complaints resurfaced. Patterns were pointed out. Stops that went nowhere. Searches that found nothing. Warnings that never turned into consequences. Within 48 hours, the officer was placed on administrative leave. Within a week, the announcement came. Termination for cause. The department tried to frame it as accountability. The public framed it as overdue. The lawsuit moved quickly. There was no appetite for trial. Depositions would be devastating. Body camera footage, dispatch audio, civilian videos from 3 angles. The risk wasn't losing. It was losing publicly. The settlement came quietly. 7 figures, taxpayer funded. No admission of wrongdoing in writing, but none needed. The message was clear. The judge made one public statement. Just one. "This is not about me," she said. "This is about what happens when authority goes unchecked. If it can happen to someone with my position, imagine how often it happens to those without it." She donated a portion of the settlement to civil rights organizations. The rest went into a trust for legal advocacy and education. She returned to the bench. Same schedule, same discipline, same quiet authority. The officer did not return to law enforcement. His badge was surrendered. His name added to a list that follows officers long after the uniform is gone. He gave no interviews. There was nothing to say. For the city, reforms followed. Mandatory de-escalation training, revised stop and search policies, early warning systems for repeat complaints, oversight boards with real power. None of it felt fast enough to the people watching, but it was something. Justice, when it came, did not arrive with sirens or applause. It arrived through paperwork, policies, and consequences. Slow, uneven, but real. And it left behind a record that could not be erased. What happened in that parking lot was not a misunderstanding. It was a constitutional violation, plain and simple. Under the Fourth Amendment, law enforcement officers are required to have reasonable, articulable suspicion before detaining someone and probable cause before making an arrest. Standing next to a legally parked vehicle with keys in hand is not reasonable suspicion. Asking an officer to explain the legal basis for a stop is not obstruction. Silence questions and calm disagreement are not crimes. The moment the officer placed handcuffs on her, without verifying ownership, without running the plates, without articulating a specific crime, the stop crossed a legal line. From that moment forward, every additional action compounded the violation. The transport, the processing, the delay, each step added liability. There is a common misconception that officers are allowed to detain first and justify later. That is false. The law requires justification first. Authority does not replace evidence. Instinct does not replace facts. This case also exposed a deeper issue: implicit bias. Bias does not always announce itself with slurs or violence. Often it appears as assumptions. Who looks like they belong? Who looks suspicious? Who is questioned and who is believed? In this case, the assumption was that a black woman did not look like the owner of a luxury vehicle in a courthouse parking lot. Everything that followed flowed from that single unchecked belief. Bias narrows perception. It filters information. Evidence that contradicts the assumption is dismissed, while anything that supports it is magnified. Keys become meaningless. Calm becomes defiance. Legal knowledge becomes attitude. This is how ordinary encounters become injustices. So what should viewers take from this? If you are stopped, Remain calm and keep your movements slow and visible. You are not required to argue on the street, but you are allowed to ask why you are being detained. You are allowed to ask if you are free to leave. You are allowed to request a supervisor. These are rights, not provocations. If you witness an encounter like this, recording matters. Stand at a safe distance. Do not interfere physically. Narrate time, location, and actions if possible. Video creates accountability when memory fails and stories change. If something goes wrong, document everything as soon as possible. Names, badge numbers, times, locations, witnesses. Seek legal counsel before giving statements beyond basic facts. Silence is not guilt, it is protection. Finally, understand this. This case reached justice not because the violation was rare, but because the evidence was undeniable. Most people subjected to similar treatment do not have cameras pointed at them. They do not have legal training. They do not have the resources to fight back. That is why this story matters. It forces a question that goes beyond one officer or one city. Should constitutional rights depend on who you are, how you look, or whether your title is known? Or should they apply equally quietly without exception? The answer determines whether justice is real or merely selective. Now ask yourself, if she had not been a judge, how would this have ended?